Good afternoon. Welcome back. It is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. We have a couple birthdays and a couple of events to go over for today. First, on the event front, 1993 on this date. There's a lot of early NASCAR racing, back in the 50s and 60s at Wilkesboro, Bowman Gray, and a few other short tracks, but there wasn't any significant events. And this one's really not significant, but it is noteworthy. 1993, Rusty Wallace wins at North Wilkesboro on this date. The significant part of this race, it was the first race back for the 7 car and Alan Quickie Racing after Alan's death. Jimmy Hensley was hired to drive the car, and he started 13th, finished 12th in a quiet run in an effort that was kind of co-sponsored by Bojangles Restaurants and Easter Seals. And what had happened is Hooters Restaurants pulled their sponsorship following Allen's passing, and rumor was that Hooters would have stayed on the car as a sponsor if they would have put ARCA driver Loy Allen Jr. in the car. Jerry Kawicki, who was in charge of Allen's estate, entrusted Felix Sabatis to run the team because he and Allen were super close. And Felix said, no dice. We're not going that way. Allen wanted Jimmy in the car, so they put Jimmy in the car for the balance of the year till Geoff Bodine bought the team out later in 1993 and would take over driving duties starting at, I believe it was Dover in the fall that year. So anyway, our second and pair of events that happened on the same day in 1999, John Andretti won at Martinsville. Two significant things about that win. One, it was John's final career NASCAR Series win, and it was also the final win for the team in the incarnation of Petty Enterprises. Of course, the team would be morphed into Gillette Everham Motorsports and kind of that Yates Racing, that whole Ford thing that went on back in 2009, and it would become Richard Petty Motorsports and no longer have that Petty Enterprises. So this would be the last win for Petty Enterprises as well. So pretty historic moment. And also on the same day in 1999 in Long Beach for the kart PPG race, I don't know if it was PPG at the time or not, probably not, but the kart race in Long Beach, Juan Pablo Montoya got his first career win for Chip Ganassi. Got 2 birthdays today. Both are pretty solid. I don't have any cards of the first guy, but born on this date in 1942, the only posthumous Formula One world champion for F1, Jochen Rindt. I believe it was 1970 that he was champion, and tragically he was killed, I want to say at Monza, with a couple of races left in that season, and he won the championship, had a large enough lead that it could not be surmounted. But our second and final birthday, again, pretty solid birthday, born on this date in 1949, former NASCAR driver, Mr. Geoff Bodine. So I'm doing these cards in the order of his career, not necessarily what year they're dated, because some of these are flashback cards. So anyway, there you see a young Geoff at the Chemung Speedrome, which was a track owned by his parents. So we have this retro card. Of course, this is going to be 1983 for Geoff, driving for Cliff Stewart in the Gatorade car. And something back in the 70s and 80s, if you ever notice, like under the driver's name, how, of course, it's stitched in and then there's some letters. If you've ever noticed that before, that's the driver's blood type. If that tells you the kind of how barbaric racing was back then, that they would sew their blood type on their uniforms. So that once again, there you see it right there underneath the lettering. But this picture's from 1984 when he joined Hendrick Motorsports. Of course, we heard about that in what I'm going to call a mockumentary on the Fox pre-race about Hendrick's the way Rick Hendrick was going to fold the team. Then they went out and won at Martinsville, and that was able to get them some sponsorship. 1985 to 1989, Geoff had Levi Garrett as his primary sponsor. In 1986, he wins Daytona. He won one race in 88 at Pocono, which was Bobby Allison's last career race. So every time it seems like Geoff pops up in victory lane, something big's going on. So in 1990, he goes to Junior Johnson. Has 3 wins in 1990, 1 win in 1991. 1992, he goes to Bud Moore, wins the Busch Clash right out of the box. Has 2 wins late in the season at Wilkesboro and Martinsville. Gets Bud Moore's final career win as a car owner in 1993 at Sears Point. Then, like I said, he bought the Kawicki estate and team and created his own team in 1994. So he had Excite on the car from 94 to 95. 96, 97, he had QVC on the car. That ended up in a big legal battle. Then 98, Phillips came on board, and it was about this time that Jim Smith came in and started buying part of the team. I'm sorry, Jim Matei, not Jim Smith. Jimmy Smith was later on the road with the same 7 car. Jim Matei came in, bought him out, and he drove for that team through 1999 and 2000. He went to drive for Joe Bessie's Pico Energy Power Team car. Of course, he had that big crash in the truck race at Daytona, which he didn't really drive this car until about a third of the way through the season. Had a nice run at Martinsville in the fall. I believe he finished 3rd or 4th. Now I've got the car cards of Jeffrey, at least the ones that I could find. So here's the Budweiser Ford that he drove for Junior Johnson. There's a nice look at Bud Moore's Motorcraft Ford. There's the aforementioned car that he bought from the Kawicki family, the team. Very similar paint job, or very similar scheme as far as what like the Hooters had, because it had the sponsorship, and then it had this. Now the Hooters didn't have the gradient on the bottom, but it did have that band going around the bottom. So I'm glad they kept some homage to the team. I pulled this one out because, again, I've mentioned about how the Power Racing from 94 had the cracked ice look, and that's a nice looking card, I think. So then, again, we talk about the QVC sponsorship that went south. Apparently there was a lot of non-payment going on there. Here's a good look at it. And then they did have one special paint scheme, which was some kind of gold. I don't know what they were trying to sell there. And then the Phillips car from 98 and 99 just had slight variations on the paint scheme. And they did switch from Ford to Chevy. So I thought that was a pretty big move. And then there's the Power Team car. I always thought this was a cool looking car. It's just a little different. Jeffrey did own a Truck Series team. He drove it. Dave Rezendes drove it. A couple other people drove it here and there. There's a couple looks at the Excite truck. And he did have a QVC truck. And Tanya Tucker's Salsa was always on his cars, it seemed like. And if you didn't know, Geoff Bodine was very instrumental in the U.S. bobsled program, getting them back up and running, getting an American-made sled to help the team, U.S. Olympic team, become successful. And there's some information about it, just to give you, and they called it Bodine, which is kind of cool. So I don't know if a lot of you may or may not know about it, because the current NASCAR media doesn't talk about a lot of the events of the past that were, well, significant. So, but Geoff has a lot of signature wins. Daytona 586, I guess that would be his biggest. He does have an all-star win in 1994, and of course the Busch Clash in 1992. So 18 career wins in total. He's got some Xfinity Series wins, and does he have a truck win? I think he's got, the only truck win he had was an exhibition win at Homestead, I believe, because I don't remember him having a points-paying win. But I hope that someday Geoff gets in the Hall of Fame. I think his credentials and his contributions to the sport stand on their own. I know he's a polarizing driver. He wasn't one of my favorites. Didn't like him much growing up because, you know, kind of grew up like an Earnhardt and some of the other ones of that era that raced with Bodine. But I think Geoff would... he's a good chassis guy from what I hear, from like what crew chiefs say, that he knew a car inside and out. He just needed a little bit more aggression, and I think that's kind of what held him back, is he was trying to not be aggressive. But I think at some point in time, Geoff's going to get in the Hall of Fame. It may take another 8 or 10 years with the crop of guys that's retiring soon, like Kevin Harvick, like Kyle or Kurt Busch, and some of these others. They will get in, I think, before Geoff will, just because they have championships and they're more fresh in the mind of today's media and today's fans. but his contributions should not be overlooked. That's just my opinion. That's my thoughts. You may differ. Feel free to express it down in the comments. I really enjoy some good commentary, some good back and forth. Not bantering, not arguing. Just, hey, this is my thoughts, my feelings, etc., etc. So anyway, it's a long birthday video, but we had a lot to talk about for the drivers. Of course, when we get these bigger name drivers in here, there's always going to be more to show and more to talk about and more to kind of pump up their careers, and that's what we're here to do. We like to talk about all the drivers that we can. The goal is to get all the birthdays we can in on the channel throughout the year. Can't believe we've been doing this almost 4 months. And just the support that you guys give it, the likes, the thumbs up, the comments, the whatever, means a lot to me. So thanks again for watching. Come back tomorrow. We'll have something to rip. Maybe we'll do a flea market find, because I've still got a ton of cards to go through. Who knows what we're going to do, but we'll have something to show you. So thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.